Okay, Pennywise Pauper, match 1. We are on the draw. Our hand is pretty bad. If we draw a land, we can get Prophetic Prism down, and then the rest of the spells in our hand become castable. Springleaf Drum also means that Flayer Husk is sort of like finding a land. So I want to keep this hand, although I am aware that it's pretty greedy. Prophetic Prism is what is tying this entire hand together. Alright, Goblins. So if we stumble, we are going to lose. But luckily we drew a second land, so that'll help us keep going fast enough to deal with an aggressive deck. Mog War Marshal will make a token. And it'll immediately get sacrificed to the Sledder. So they can attack for 2 this turn. Okay, so we can Prophetic Prism. And we can play Frogmite if we draw it. But we did not draw it. And we might just lose this game to an overrun of goblins, but we'll see. Bushwhacker kicked. Okay, we're taking 8. Down to 10. Chromatic Star. So I think what we're going to do here is start off with Thoughtcast. And the reason we're going to do that is we want to find more lands so we can get our affinity spells to be even cheaper. Alright, we didn't find a land, which is pretty bad for us. So we actually can't really do much of anything here. We can play a star and pass the turn. But yeah, that's unfortunate. If we'd drawn one more land, then we could have played Hoverguard, or we could have played multiple stars into a Mirror Enforcer or something like that, so at least we'd have a blocker, but as it is, we could not find land fast enough. And we are taking 10 here. And it's already time to sideboard. So here we want 1 Hydroblast against the red spells that our opponent is bringing to the table, 3 Electricity against all the 1-toughness creatures, and 2 Armadillo Cloak for racing our opponent. We're going to remove 4 Somber Hoverguard, since they don't block particularly well and they take a little bit of time to get online. 1 Springleaf Drum, and 1 Frogmite. And we'll submit that. Okay, game 2 we get to be on the play. This hand is pretty good. We have turn 2 Carapace Forger into turn 3 Armadillo Cloak, which is obviously awesome. So we're going to keep. We could potentially have a 6/6 attacking on turn 3 with lifelink. Alright, our opponent leads off with a Mog Raider. We could also play a Frogmite here, but Carapace Forger is much larger as of next turn. It is a little bit dangerous to lay out the Carapace Forger here because it could die to a Tar Fire or a Bolt. Whereas it couldn't if we waited a turn, but I wanted to take the higher risk play. Okay, so here we can play Frogmite, and then we can play Thoughtcast, each for 1 mana apiece. So I'm going to go with that. And then we could play Star, and plan on playing either Mirror Enforcer or Armadillo Cloak next turn, depending on how this goes. We might be blocking the Mog Raider here, and trying to get a 2 for 1 in. So Mog Raider says sacrifice a goblin, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It's very similar to the Goblin Sledder. I believe Goblin Sledder might say target goblin gets +1/+1 until end of turn, but with all goblins being in their deck, they do the same thing. Sparksmith. Tap, it deals X damage to target creature and X damage to you, where X is the number of goblins you control, so that's repeatable removal for them. So if we do Armadillo Cloak and attack, even if they don't block, then they could deal 4 to it with Sparksmith, which obviously is not great for us. So if we could get rid of one of their creatures this turn, that would be optimal. Or if we could just lay out multiple creatures, so I think we're going to go with that. So I believe we're going to lead with Springleaf Drum into Mirror Enforcer, and then we're going to crack this Chromatic Star. And we will crack it for red, because we could play a Tog. Okay, so we have Carapace Forger as probably the best option to play here. This gives us 2/4/4s blocking, And if they want to Sparksmith and get rid of one of them, they can. They're going to have to take 4 to do it. And then we get to crack back with our Armadillo cloaked up 4/4. So our opponent drops to 16 to get our Carapace Forger off the table. They play a Goblin Sledder. Oh no, it's exactly the same as Mog Raider. It doesn't say target Goblin, it also says target creature. In case you're not familiar, both of these 1-mana 2/2s are also the same as each other. They can't attack unless you've cast a creature spell this turn. And our opponent passes a turn. So do we go for Armadillo Cloak here? That's the biggest question. So our opponent could block with 4 things, and we could 4 for 1 our opponent. Alternatively, they could just pass a turn, play another goblin, go to 6 goblins, and then Sparksmith would be able to deal with it. However, then they're falling to a very dangerous life total, because we would hit them for 6, they'd take 6 from the Sparksmith, and then they'd be at 4 and they would die to a single Galvanic Blast if we drew one. So I think this is the turn that we want to go for it. They only have 1 card in hand as well, so they can't go like Tarfire plus Tarfire. And we'll see what this does for us. We could also potentially attack with a Frogmite this turn to put a little bit more pressure on our opponent, but I would rather have a blocker back. Single block isn't really going to accomplish anything here, I don't believe, because it has trample. So they sacrifice it to give the other goblin +1/+1. I still don't know what they're going to do with that, but we only have 1 mana here from the Springleaf Drum, so we can't cast any of our spells. We go all the way up to 25 from that attack, so we're in a pretty safe place here. Flame Slash, okay, so maybe Sparksmith to... Okay, yep, so they fall to 6 in order to deal with it, so we're perfectly fine with that. And then a Bushwhacker. Alright, if our opponent attacks with all here, I don't think I'm going to block, because then our opponent is dead to a Galvanic Blast. Yep, that's fine. I don't have red for a Galvanic Blast right now, but I will once I play this Prophetic Prism. And our opponent concedes. Interesting. Well, we didn't have lethal on board, but we were in a fairly good position because they couldn't really use their Sparksmith anymore, and we could just play a couple of creatures. Alright, on to game 3. Our opponent gets to be on the play again, which is a pretty big deal. We're going to keep this hand. We have Springleaf Drum plus Flayer Husk as an additional mana source, and if we draw more lands, it's even better, so... Obviously, if our opponent just takes out the Flayer Husk, that's a problem for us. So we could play the Springleaf Drum first, which is what I'm going to do. If our opponent had played a 1 toughness goblin, I would have played Flayer Husk first to threaten to block, since our opponent wouldn't have known that we had Springleaf in hand and wanted to keep the creature around. But as it is, our opponent will just be able to attack into it anyway. Okay, they have a Sparksmith. We're probably going to have to take that down with a Galvanic Blast to prevent them repeatedly killing our creatures. Alright, so here we get to play Flayer Husk. A free Frogmite. And we also get to go ahead and kill this. Well, we're going to Thoughtcast first, but then we're going to use Galvanic Blast to take out Sparksmith. There's like Trickery, so we could wait a little bit. For example, I could kill the Cohort here instead of the Sparksmith, but that feels a little bit too risky. Yeah, I think I'm just going to take out this Sparksmith while I have the chance. I'll probably find some avenue later where I can play this Electrickery for value. It seems our opponent did side out more of their 1 toughness creatures in anticipation of Electrickery, as is their plan probably against a lot of decks playing red, but they didn't side out all their 1 toughness creatures. Our opponent's at 4 cards in hand. They don't really have much of a board state yet. The Electrickery helps us against a lot of broken things that they could do, and we can also just play like 2 4/4s next turn most likely. So I think we're in a pretty good position. Mog Raider. There's an attack. I'm happy to block here. I realize they can sacrifice the Mog Raider to make their attacker a 3/3, but I'm okay with that. It does take down our affinity count a little bit by getting rid of a Frogmite, but I just want to slow our opponent down as much as possible. Galvanic Blast. That's a pretty cool draw. Just keep our opponent off of creatures entirely. So I think I'll lead with Carapace Forger. Then I get to attack for 1. And then I get to leave back Carapace Forger to block with Galvanic Blast up. Or Electrickery, non-overloaded. Our opponent has smashed Smithereens. Well, that's quite unfortunate for us, because we need the red source. Since we don't know, well, we'll get a red, a one-time use of red mana out of this star, but since we don't know whenever we'll be able to do this again easily, I'm going to just take out the Goblin Cohort right now. Then I don't have to worry about a combat trick or something while I'm blocking next turn, because I really want to keep this Carapace Forger around. Okay, there's the Mog War Marshal. So we can cycle this Chromatic Star into red for an Electrickery now. The problem is, he also led up with the Goblin Sledder. So if we were to play Electrickery, we'd first of all have to draw another land, because after we pay 2 to play this and cycle it, we'll only have the 1 red remaining. But even if they did it, they could sacrifice Mog War Marshal to give this +1/+1, and then sacrifice the token that comes off of the War Marshal to save the other one. Well, we can't actually cast anything else at the moment, so we do have to lead with Chromatic Star. The question is if we want to crack it right away. I think we do for red. If nothing else, we can Galvanic Blast the Goblin Sledder. Yep, that looks like the only thing that we really can do here. I could also Electrickery it without overloading, but that means they only have to sacrifice one thing. Okay. And we can go ahead and attack here. Well, actually, no, we can't, because they're not going to pay the echo cost on that Mog War Marshal, most likely. And we want to make them either do that or not trade for our germ for no value. Okay, so they're actually going to pay the echo cost on Mog War Marshal. You don't see that very often. And they pass the turn. Okay, we have another spare Carapace Forger. Or we could play out Mirror Enforcer. Oh, no, we can't. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We have 4 artifacts, so it'll cost 3. We could also play Electrickery. We have a lot of really good choices here. Oh, actually, we lost our red source because we used up the Chromatic Star already. So I guess I'll use my mana a little bit better and play the thing that costs 3 right now. That way if I draw maybe Thoughtcast next turn, it'd be better to Thoughtcast plus Carapace Forger. And we're in a very good position right now. We have 2 4/4s versus our opponent's 2 1/1s, and they only have 2 cards in hand, so... We also have Electrickery online once we eventually find a red source. Okay, we get our Mirror Enforcer smashed. And our opponent's going to attack with just the token here. Alright, I'm willing to block. It's a little bit awkward if we draw Springleaf Drum, since we'll have to tap our 4/4 instead of the germ, but... Okay. I'm going to go ahead and keep attacking, since I have another 4/4 in hand. I should have actually equipped the Flayer Husk first. But as it is, our opponent is blocking. So we get to equip the Flayer Husk to the untapped creature for blocking purposes, which will end up working out better, since our opponent chose that turn to chump block. Flame Slash takes out the one that's not equipped. Opponent's at 1 card in hand. Prophetic Prism. Well, that's a great draw. Alright, Thoughtcast is also incredible. Another Thoughtcast. I like that. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Ancient Den. Go ahead and play it out. And I don't think we can reasonably lose this game now. Our opponent could go maybe double Bushwhacker, or I guess in this case Cohort plus Bushwhacker, but that only puts us to 5, and we're going to play Armadillo Cloak and just win the game now. And it's actually not even a figurative win the game. We're actually just going to win the game because we can fling post-combat to deal the rest of the damage. Excellent. We took down our match against Goblins, and we are on to match 2.